My name is Serafina Blackwood, and 3 days ago I discovered that everything I believed about my family was a lie. Standing in my late grandmother's attorney's office, I learned I had been written out of her multi-million-dollar will, the same will that left everything to my cousin Marcus, who everyone claimed was practically raised by Grandma Rose. But here is the twist that shattered my world. The adoption papers revealed I was not abandoned by strangers. I was abandoned by my own aunt. Before we dive into this wild family betrayal story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if this hook already has you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty, smash that like button and subscribe, because this revenge story gets absolutely insane. Trust me, you will want to see how this all plays out. Growing up, I always knew I was adopted, but my parents painted such a beautiful picture of my origin story. They told me I was a blessing, a baby whose birth mother could not care for her, so she made the selfless choice to place me with a loving family. My adoptive parents, David and Margaret Blackwood, were wonderful people who never made me feel like anything less than their biological daughter. They gave me every opportunity, paid for my education, and supported my dreams of becoming a forensic accountant. What they never told me was that they were actually my aunt and uncle. Margaret Blackwood was my biological mother's sister. My real mother was Elena Blackwood Morrison, Margaret's younger sister, who had died in a car accident when I was 6 months old. But here is where the story gets darker. Elena did not die in some random accident. She was fleeing the family compound at 3 a.m. with me in her car, trying to escape what she had discovered about the family business. Grandmother Rose Morrison owned Morrison Industries, a seemingly legitimate construction company that had been in the family for 4 generations. What Elena discovered, and what got her killed, was that Morrison Industries was a front for money laundering. The company had been washing money for various criminal organizations for decades, and Elena had stumbled upon financial records that proved it all. The night Elena died, she had been carrying a briefcase full of evidence, bank statements, forged contracts, and recorded conversations that would have brought down the entire Morrison empire. That briefcase disappeared from the crash site before police arrived. For 25 years, everyone believed those documents were destroyed in the fire that consumed Elena's car. Everyone except Grandmother Rose. 3 months ago, Rose Morrison died at the age of 87, taking what everyone assumed were all her secrets to the grave. The family gathered for the will reading like vultures circling fresh meat. My cousin Marcus had always been Rose's golden boy, the heir apparent who would inherit Morrison Industries and the family fortune worth approximately $15 million. I attended the will reading, expecting maybe a small inheritance, perhaps some jewelry or a personal memento. After all, Rose had never shown me much affection, but I was still family. Instead, I sat in stunned silence as the attorney read clause after clause that excluded me entirely from any inheritance. The will specifically stated that all assets would go to blood relatives only, and since I was adopted, I was not considered a true Morrison. But Marcus was not a blood relative either. Marcus Morrison was actually Marcus Kellerman, the son of Rose's housekeeper, who had been informally adopted into the family when he was 12 years old after his mother died. Yet somehow, his adoption did not disqualify him from inheriting everything, while mine disqualified me from inheriting anything. That discrepancy bothered me enough to hire my own attorney and request copies of all relevant documents. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The adoption papers revealed that my birth mother was Elena Blackwood Morrison, Rose's own daughter. Margaret and David had lied to me for 25 years about who I really was. But the bigger revelation was hidden in Elena's personal effects, which had been stored in a safety deposit box that automatically transferred to my name upon Rose's death, a detail that had been overlooked in the will. Inside that safety deposit box was Elena's backup copy of all the evidence against Morrison Industries, plus a letter addressed to me specifically. "My darling Serafina," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then Rose has finally died, and you have discovered the truth about our family. I pray that you are old enough and strong enough to handle what I am about to tell you. Rose Morrison is not your grandmother. She is your great aunt. I am not your cousin. I am your mother. And the people who raised you as their own are not strangers who adopted you out of kindness. They are my sister and brother-in-law who took you in to protect you from Rose's wrath." The letter went on to explain that Rose had murdered my grandfather when Elena was just 16, making it look like a heart attack. Rose had discovered that my grandfather was planning to go to the authorities about the money laundering operation, so she poisoned him with digitalis, a heart medication that would be undetectable in an elderly man with known heart problems. Elena had witnessed the murder, but had been too afraid to speak up at the time. For years, she lived in fear, knowing that Rose was capable of killing anyone who threatened the family business. When Elena discovered she was pregnant with me, she also discovered that Rose was planning to expand the money laundering operation into human trafficking. That was Elena's breaking point. She gathered evidence for months, planning to take everything to the FBI after I was born. But Rose suspected Elena's plans and had been watching her carefully. The night Elena tried to escape with the evidence, and with me, Rose's security team forced her car off the road. Margaret and David knew the truth about the crash, but they also knew that speaking up would put their own lives in danger. So they took me in, gave me a new identity as an adopted child rather than Elena's biological daughter, and spent 25 years protecting me from Rose's reach. But now Rose was dead, and the truth was finally coming out. The most devastating part of Elena's letter was the revelation about Marcus. He was not just some random kid that Rose had taken in out of kindness. Marcus was Rose's biological grandson, the son of the man Rose had been having an affair with while married to my grandfather. His mother, the housekeeper, had been blackmailed into silence about the affair in exchange for a job and security for her son. When Marcus's mother died, Rose brought him into the family, officially training him from childhood to take over the business operations. Marcus knew about the money laundering, knew about my grandfather's murder, and knew exactly who I was. His entire life had been built on a foundation of lies and criminal activity. The worst part was that Marcus had actively participated in keeping me away from Rose during her final years. Every time I tried to visit or build a relationship with my supposed grandmother, Marcus would intercept my calls and visits, telling Rose that I was too busy with my own life to care about family. He systematically poisoned Rose against me while presenting himself as the devoted grandson who never left her side. Reading Elena's letter felt like the ground disappearing beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my identity, my family, and my place in the world had been a carefully constructed lie. But Elena's letter ended with a challenge that lit a fire in my chest. Rose stole your birthright, stole your mother, and stole your life, but she cannot steal your future. The evidence in this box will destroy Morrison Industries and everyone who helped perpetuate these crimes. The choice is yours, my darling daughter. You can walk away and build a life free from this poison, or you can take back what was stolen from you and make sure that justice is finally served. Whatever you choose, know that I loved you more than my own life, and I believe you are strong enough to handle the truth. Sitting in that attorney's office 3 days ago, holding my mother's letter and surrounded by evidence of 25 years of deception, I made my choice. Marcus Morrison had played his last card, and Rose Morrison's crimes would not die with her. It was time for the truth to come out, and it was time for justice to be served. The first person I confronted was not Marcus. It was Margaret and David. After 25 years of lies, I needed to hear the truth directly from the people who had raised me. I drove straight from the attorney's office to their house, Elena's letter clutched in my hands like a weapon. Margaret broke down crying the moment she saw the documents. "We wanted to tell you so many times," she sobbed, "but we were terrified that Rose would find out and hurt you the way she hurt Elena." David was more defensive. "You have to understand, Sarah Rose Morrison was not just wealthy, she was dangerous. She had connections everywhere. Police officers, judges, politicians, they were all in her pocket. We could not risk exposing you. So instead you let me grow up thinking I was some unwanted baby whose birth mother abandoned me?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what that did to my sense of self-worth? Do you know how many nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me, that my own mother did not want me?" Margaret reached for my hands, but I pulled away. "We thought we were protecting you from something worse," she whispered. "You were protecting yourselves," I replied coldly. "You were protecting your comfortable life, your safety, your security. You never once thought about what the truth might mean to me." But even as I confronted them, I realized that my anger toward Margaret and David was misplaced. They had genuinely tried to protect me, even if their methods were flawed. The real enemy was the woman who had orchestrated all of this suffering and the cousin who was now profiting from her crimes. Rose Morrison might be dead, but Marcus was very much alive, and he was currently liquidating assets from Morrison Industries as quickly as possible. According to Elena's financial records, he had been embezzling money from the company for the past 3 years, transferring funds to offshore accounts in preparation for Rose's death. Marcus thought he was untouchable now. He thought that with Rose gone and me excluded from the will, he could clean out the company accounts and disappear with everything. What he did not know was that Elena's evidence included detailed financial records of every illegal transaction Morrison Industries had ever conducted, including Marcus's recent embezzlement. I spent the next week carefully analyzing every document Elena had left behind. As a forensic accountant, I understood exactly what I was looking at. Shell companies' fake invoices, laundered payments disguised as legitimate construction contracts. The evidence was overwhelming and absolutely damning. But I also knew that simply turning everything over to the FBI would not be enough. Marcus had spent years building relationships with corrupt officials, just like Rose had. He would find a way to wiggle out of the charges or disappear before they could arrest him. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to destroy him publicly first so that running would be his only option. My plan started with Marcus's fiancée, Jessica Hartwell, daughter of a prominent federal judge. Jessica had no idea that she was engaged to a criminal, and she definitely had no idea that the lavish lifestyle Marcus provided was funded by money laundering and murder. Jessica was also incredibly image-conscious. Her entire social media presence was built around being the perfect political wife, married to a successful businessman. I arranged to meet Jessica for lunch at her favorite upscale restaurant, claiming I wanted to discuss a family matter now that Rose had passed away. Jessica arrived perfectly dressed and perfectly fake, gushing about how sad she was about my disappointing exclusion from the will. "I just think it is so unfair," Jessica said, delicately cutting her salad. "I mean, I know you were adopted, but you are still family in all the ways that matter." "Actually, Jessica, there is something about my adoption that you should know," I said, sliding a copy of my birth certificate across the table. "I was not adopted by strangers. Margaret and David Blackwood are my biological aunt and uncle. Elena Blackwood Morrison, who died 25 years ago, was my biological mother." Jessica's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I do not understand. If that is true, then you would be Rose's biological granddaughter, not just an adopted family member." "Exactly," I said, "which means Marcus has been lying to you about who I am and what I am entitled to inherit. But that is not even the worst part." I pulled out photocopies of some of Elena's financial evidence, nothing that would compromise the investigation. but enough to show Jessica exactly what kind of man she was engaged to marry. Morrison Industries is a money laundering operation, Jessica. It has been for decades. Your fiancé is not a legitimate businessman. He is a criminal who inherited a criminal empire. Jessica's face went completely white as she scanned the documents. This cannot be real. Marcus would never. Marcus has been embezzling money from the company for years. I interrupted, showing her the financial records. Look at these transfer dates. He has been moving money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands every month for the past 3 years. He has been stealing millions of dollars in preparation for Rose's death. Jessica stared at the papers for a long moment, her hands trembling. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because you have a choice to make, I said gently. You can marry a criminal and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for the FBI to come knocking on your door. Or you can walk away now before his crimes destroy your reputation and your father's career. I could see the wheels turning in Jessica's head. Her father was a federal judge who prided himself on his integrity and his tough stance on white-collar crime. If it came out that his daughter was married to a money launderer, it would destroy his career and their family's reputation. What do you want from me? Jessica asked quietly. I want you to help me expose Marcus publicly before he can disappear with the money, I said. I want you to help me make sure that justice is served for my mother's murder and my grandfather's murder, and everyone else who has been hurt by this family's crimes. Jessica was quiet for a long time, staring down at the evidence spread across our lunch table. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Marcus is supposed to pick me up from here, she said, her voice stronger now. He thinks we are just having a casual family lunch. What do you need me to do? What Jessica did not know was that I had already set up a much larger trap. While she was processing the revelation about Marcus's crimes, I had been working with Elena's former colleague at the FBI agent, Sarah Rodriguez, who had been investigating Morrison Industries for years, but could never get enough evidence to build a case. Agent Rodriguez had confirmed that Elena's evidence was exactly what they needed to shut down Morrison Industries permanently and arrest everyone involved in the operation. But she agreed with my assessment that Marcus would likely flee if he suspected an investigation was coming. So we arranged for Jessica to wear a wire during her conversation with Marcus after lunch. Jessica would confront him about the evidence I had shown her, and Marcus would hopefully incriminate himself trying to explain everything away. What we got was even better than we had hoped for. Marcus arrived at the restaurant 40 minutes later, clearly irritated about being kept waiting. He kissed Jessica perfunctorily and immediately started complaining about having to deal with family drama now that Rose was dead. Speaking of family drama, Jessica said carefully, I had an interesting conversation with Sarah today. Marcus's entire demeanor changed instantly. His face hardened, and his voice took on a cold edge that Jessica had never heard before. What did that little bitch want now? Did she come crying to you about being excluded from the will? Actually, she told me something really disturbing. Jessica continued following the script we had rehearsed. She showed me documents that suggested Morrison Industries might not be entirely legitimate. Marcus grabbed Jessica's wrist hard enough to make her wince. What kind of documents? Financial records, bank transfers, shell companies. Marcus, she is claiming that you have been laundering money and embezzling from the family business. Marcus released Jessica's wrist and leaned back in his chair, his mind clearly racing. Sarah always was too smart for her own good, he said finally, just like her bitch mother. What does that mean? Jessica asked, and I could hear the fear in her voice even through the recording device. It means that some people do not know when to leave well enough alone, Marcus said. Elena thought she was so clever gathering evidence against Rose, threatening to destroy everything our family had built. Look how that worked out for her. Marcus, you are scaring me, What are you talking about? Marcus looked around the restaurant to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward and spoke in a low voice that the wire barely picked up. Elena Blackwood Morrison did not die in an accident, Jessica. She died because she was a traitor who threatened the family business. And if her daughter thinks she can pick up where Elena left off, she is going to learn the same lesson her mother learned. Are you saying that Elena was murdered? I am saying that people who threaten this family tend to have very unfortunate accidents, Marcus replied coldly. Rose taught me everything I need to know about protecting our interests. Jessica had heard enough. She excused herself to go to the bathroom where she removed the wire device and texted Agent Rodriguez that she had gotten everything we needed. Then she returned to the table, broke up with Marcus on the spot, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Marcus tried calling her repeatedly over the next several hours, but Jessica had already moved back in with her parents and was preparing to cooperate fully with the FBI investigation. The recording of Marcus's confession was more than enough to secure arrest warrants for him and several other people connected to Morrison Industries. But I was not satisfied with just having Marcus arrested. I wanted him to suffer the way Elena had suffered, the way I had suffered growing up believing I was unwanted and unloved. I wanted Marcus to experience betrayal the way he had betrayed me. Over the next 3 weeks, I carefully orchestrated the complete destruction of Marcus's life. Working with Agent Rodriguez and Jessica, I began reaching out to everyone who had been hurt by Morrison Industries over the years. Employees who had been fired for asking questions, contractors who had been blacklisted for refusing to participate in illegal activities, and families of workers who had died in accidents that were actually murders. The first person I contacted was Robert Hayes, a former Morrison Industries foreman who had been fired 5 years earlier for refusing to falsify safety inspection reports. Robert had tried to blow the whistle on Morrison's corner cutting and had been systematically destroyed for his efforts. Rose Morrison had used her connections to make sure Robert could not find work anywhere in the construction industry, and his family had lost their home as a result. I have been waiting for this day for 5 years, Robert said when I showed him Elena's evidence. I knew Rose Morrison was dirty, but I could never prove it. That woman destroyed my life because I would not help her kill innocent people. Robert introduced me to Maria Santos, whose husband had died in a Morrison Industries accident that was actually a murder disguised to look like a workplace incident. Maria's husband had discovered discrepancies in the company's books and had planned to report them to the authorities. 3 days later, he was crushed by a piece of equipment that had been deliberately sabotaged. Maria had spent 3 years trying to prove that her husband's death was not an accident, but Morrison Industries had covered their tracks too well. She had been forced to raise 3 children alone while fighting a legal battle she could never win. They stole my husband, they stole my children's father, and they stole our future, Maria said through tears. If you can finally bring them down, I will do whatever it takes to help you. Through Robert and Maria, I connected with dozens of other Morrison Industries victims, a network of people who had been waiting years for the opportunity to seek justice. Together, we formed what Agent Rodriguez dubbed the Coalition, a group of witnesses and victims who could testify to Morrison Industries' decades of criminal activity. But our most valuable ally turned out to be someone I never expected: Rose Morrison's former personal assistant, Patricia Williams, who had worked for the family for over 30 years. Patricia contacted me through Robert, explaining that she had kept detailed records of all of Rose's activities as a form of insurance policy. Patricia knew about the murders, the money laundering, the bribes, and the cover-ups because she had been the one organizing Rose's schedule and managing her communications. Mrs. Morrison thought I was just a simple secretary who did not understand what was really happening, Patricia explained during our first meeting. But I have a master's degree in accounting, and I knew exactly what those financial reports meant. I also knew that someday she might try to pin everything on me, so I kept copies of everything. Patricia's records were incredibly detailed and went back decades, She had copies of communications between Rose and various criminal organizations, records of bribes paid to government officials, and even audio recordings of Rose discussing the murders of my grandfather and my mother. "The night your mother died, Mrs. Morrison called me at home to arrange for the cleanup crew," Patricia said, handing me a CD labeled Elena Insurance. She was so angry that Elena had escaped with the evidence that she forgot I was recording our conversation. Listening to that recording was one of the most difficult things I have ever done. Rose Morrison's voice was cold and calculating as she discussed having Elena's car forced off the road and making sure the evidence was retrieved before police arrived at the scene. "The girl is dead, and the baby probably is too," Rose said on the recording. "Good. Elena was always too weak for this family anyway. Make sure the evidence is destroyed and that this looks like a simple accident." But Rose's associate on the phone corrected her. I had survived the crash and was being taken to the hospital. Rose's response chilled me to the bone. "Then take care of the baby too. We cannot have any loose ends." The only reason I survived was because Margaret and David arrived at the hospital first and convinced Rose that I had died from my injuries. They had faked my death certificate and secretly moved me out of state until they could arrange for legal adoption papers. Margaret and David had saved my life by lying to Rose Morrison for 25 years, telling her that Elena's baby had died in the crash. Every birthday card they sent, every Christmas photo, every update about my life, they sent it all to Rose with fake names and stories, making Rose believe she was looking at the children of distant friends. Patricia's revelation about my faked death explained why Rose had never tried to contact me or build a relationship with me. She literally thought I had been dead for 25 years. But Marcus knew the truth. Marcus had discovered the deception when he was 18, and Patricia accidentally let something slip about Elena's daughter still being alive. Instead of telling Rose, Marcus decided to use the information as leverage. He blackmailed Margaret and David into keeping me away from Rose, threatening to reveal the truth about my survival if they ever let me get too close to the family business. Marcus had spent 7 years systematically poisoning Rose against my adoptive parents, telling her that they were ungrateful relatives who had turned their backs on the family after Elena's death. He convinced Rose that Margaret and David were trying to distance themselves from Morrison Industries because they disapproved of the family business. "Your cousin is a master manipulator," Patricia said. "He convinced Mrs. Morrison that your adoptive parents were ashamed of their connection to the family, which is why they never brought you around. Mrs. Morrison died believing that you had rejected the family when the truth is that Marcus never gave you the chance to have a relationship with her." Patricia's information was the final piece of evidence we needed to destroy Marcus completely. But it also revealed something that changed my entire perspective on Rose Morrison. While reviewing Patricia's records, I discovered that Rose had been planning to change her will in the months before she died. She had instructed Patricia to research legitimate charitable organizations that supported orphaned children, and she had been planning to leave a significant portion of her estate to organizations that helped kids who had lost their parents. Rose Morrison was a murderer and a criminal, but she had also been genuinely grieving the loss of her granddaughter for 25 years. In her twisted way, she had been trying to honor Elena's memory and my supposed death by helping other children in similar situations. "Mrs. Morrison talked about you constantly," Patricia admitted. "She kept a photo of Elena holding you as a baby on her desk until the day she died. She used to say that losing Elena and her baby was her greatest regret, and that she wished she could have protected you both from the dangers of the family business." This revelation complicated my feelings about Rose Morrison significantly. She was still responsible for my mother's death and my grandfather's death, and she had built an empire on criminal activity. But she had also been a grieving grandmother who thought she had lost her granddaughter forever. Marcus, on the other hand, had deliberately kept us apart for his own selfish purposes. He had let Rose die believing that her granddaughter was dead, and that Elena's sacrifice had been for nothing. That betrayal was unforgivable. With Patricia's help, we planned the perfect trap for Marcus. Patricia contacted Marcus and told him that she had discovered some irregularities in Rose's final financial records discrepancies that suggested someone had been embezzling money from the company before Rose's death. Marcus immediately demanded a meeting, clearly panicked that his theft was about to be exposed. Patricia arranged to meet him at Morrison Industries after hours when the building would be empty and they could speak privately. What Marcus did not know was that the entire building had been wired for audio and video recording by the FBI. Every word he said, every incriminating action he took, was being captured on high-definition cameras and broadcast live to Agent Rodriguez and her team. Marcus walked into the building that night believing he was going to intimidate an elderly secretary into keeping quiet about his embezzlement. Instead, he walked into a carefully orchestrated sting operation that would capture his confession to multiple felonies. Patricia played her role perfectly. She presented Marcus with fabricated financial reports that suggested someone had been stealing money from Morrison Industries for years, carefully leading him toward a confession without making it obvious that she was working with law enforcement. "I know it was you, Marcus," Patricia said, her voice trembling with fake fear. "I have been Mrs. Morrison's assistant for 30 years, and I know what these numbers mean. You have been stealing from the company since before she died." Marcus's response was exactly what we had hoped for. "You do not understand the pressure I have been under," Marcus said, beginning to pace around Rose's office. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain the lifestyle Rose expected me to live? The house, the cars, the country club memberships, it all costs money, and the legitimate side of the business barely breaks even. So you decided to steal from your own grandmother." "I decided to take what was rightfully mine," Marcus snapped. "I have been running this company for Rose for 5 years. I have been cleaning up her messes, managing her criminal associates, and keeping the authorities from sniffing around our business. I deserve to be compensated for that work." Patricia pushed harder. "What about Sarah? If she is really Elena's daughter, do not you think she deserves a share of the inheritance?" Marcus's face twisted with rage. "Sarah does not deserve anything. She is Elena's bastard daughter, and Elena was a traitor who tried to destroy everything this family built. If Rose had known that Sarah was still alive, she would have finished what she started 25 years ago." "What does that mean?" Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at Patricia with cold, calculating eyes. "It means that Sarah Blackwood is living on borrowed time. Elena thought she was smart enough to outsmart Rose Morrison, and look how that worked out for her. Sarah is making the same mistake, and she is going to get the same result." That confession sealed Marcus's fate. Within minutes of leaving the building, he was arrested by FBI agents who had been waiting outside. The charges against him included embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and making terroristic threats. But our victory was short-lived. 3 days after Marcus's arrest, Patricia Williams was found dead in her apartment from an apparent heart attack. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes, but Agent Rodriguez suspected foul play. Patricia had been in perfect health and had no history of heart problems. More troubling was the discovery that Patricia's apartment had been thoroughly searched before her body was found. Someone had been looking for something specific, and they had found it. Patricia's personal copies of Rose Morrison's records, the insurance files she had kept for 30 years, were missing. We realized that Marcus had not been working alone. Someone else in the Morrison Industries organization had been helping him, someone with the connections and resources to eliminate threats even while Marcus was in federal custody. Our coalition was no longer safe, and the investigation was in jeopardy. Marcus might be in jail, but the real power behind Morrison Industries was still out there, still dangerous, and still determined to protect the criminal empire that Rose Morrison had built. The war was far from over. Patricia's death shattered our coalition in ways I had never anticipated. Within 24 hours of her funeral, 3 other key witnesses withdrew their cooperation with the FBI investigation. Robert Hayes called me in a panic, saying that his wife had received threatening phone calls warning her that accidents happen to people who talk too much. Maria Santos moved her children out of state overnight, leaving behind a voicemail saying she was sorry, but could not risk her kids' safety. The systematic intimidation campaign was clearly being orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of our investigation. Someone knew exactly who our witnesses were, where they lived, and how to pressure them most effectively. But the most devastating blow came when I discovered that our inside information was being leaked by Agent Rodriguez herself. I stumbled onto the truth completely by accident. While reviewing Patricia's phone records that the FBI had obtained as part of their investigation, I noticed something strange. Patricia had made several calls to a number I recognized it was Agent Rodriguez's personal cell phone, not her FBI office line. The calls had occurred outside of normal business hours and had lasted much longer than typical witness interviews. Digging deeper, I discovered that Agent Rodriguez had been in contact with Patricia for over 2 years, long before I had ever approached the FBI with Elena's evidence. They had not just met when I brought them together, they had already been working together on something else entirely. My forensic accounting background kicked in, and I started following the money trail. What I found made my blood run cold. Agent Rodriguez had been receiving monthly payments of $5,000 from a shell company called Security Consulting Solutions for the past 18 months. Security Consulting Solutions was owned by Morrison Industries. Rose Morrison had been paying Agent Rodriguez to feed her information about FBI investigations into Morrison Industries. Rodriguez was not just corrupt, she was a double agent who had been protecting Rose's criminal empire while pretending to investigate it. But the betrayal went even deeper than simple corruption. I confronted Rodriguez during what she believed was a routine meeting to discuss the investigation's progress. Instead, I presented her with bank records showing the payments from Morrison Industries and phone records proving her secret relationship with Patricia. "You have been working for Rose Morrison this entire time," I said, watching Rodriguez's face carefully for her reaction. Rodriguez did not even try to deny it. Instead, she smiled coldly and leaned back in her chair like a predator who had finally decided to stop pretending to be prey. "Working for Rose Nocera, I have been working for myself. Rose Morrison was a useful tool, but she was also a liability. Old, sentimental, and ultimately too weak to do what needed to be done." "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the fact that Rose Morrison's operation was small-time compared to what Morrison Industries could become with the right leadership. Rose was content to launder money for other criminal organizations, taking a small percentage and staying under the radar. But I saw the potential for something much bigger." Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window of her office, looking out at the city below like a queen surveying her kingdom. "Do you want to know who really killed Patricia Williams?" Rodriguez asked conversationally. "It was me. Patricia was getting cold feet about her cooperation with our investigation. She started asking too many questions about why I needed so much detailed information about Rose's historical operations. She was becoming a liability." The casual way Rodriguez admitted to murder made my stomach turn. "You killed her to protect yourself." "I killed her to protect a business opportunity worth hundreds of millions of dollars," Rodriguez corrected. "With Rose dead and Marcus in prison, Morrison Industries needed new leadership, someone young, ambitious, and with the connections necessary to expand operations nationwide." "You are planning to take over Morrison Industries?" "I am planning to franchise Morrison Industries," Rodriguez said with obvious pride. "Money laundering, human trafficking, corporate espionage, political corruption, there is a massive market for these services, and Morrison Industries already has the infrastructure in place to provide them. All it needed was someone with vision and federal law enforcement credentials to make it untouchable." Rodriguez turned back to face me, and for the first time I saw her as she really was not a dedicated FBI agent seeking justice, but a predator who had been playing a long game that I had never even suspected. Patricia's death was unfortunate but necessary, Rodriguez continued. She had served her purpose by helping us gather evidence against Marcus, but she knew too much about my plans for the company's future. I could not risk her developing a conscience. "And what about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the terror creeping up my spine. Rodriguez smiled again, and this time it was genuinely warm. "You, my dear Sarah, are going to be my partner. Like it or not, you are the legitimate heir to Morrison Industries. With Marcus in prison and Rose dead, you are the only person who can legally take control of the company assets. Together, we can build something that makes Rose Morrison's operation look like a lemonade stand. I would never work with you. You will work with me, or you will join your mother and Patricia in whatever afterlife awaits traitors and troublemakers," Rodriguez said matter-of-factly. "Those are your only two options." Rodriguez walked back to her desk and pulled out a thick file folder. "This contains detailed information about every member of your coalition, every person who has helped you gather evidence, and every family member you care about. Margaret and David, for example, are currently having lunch at their favorite restaurant on 5th Street. It would be such a shame if they suffered the same kind of tragic accident that claimed your mother." The threat was clear and absolutely serious. Rodriguez had been positioning herself to take control of Morrison Industries from the beginning, using the FBI investigation as a cover to eliminate her competition and gather intelligence on potential threats. "I need time to think about this," I said carefully. "You have 24 hours to make your decision," Rodriguez replied. "Meet me tomorrow night at the Morrison Industries building. Come alone and come prepared to sign documents transferring legal control of the company to our new partnership. If you fail to show up, or if you contact anyone about our conversation, Margaret and David will die first, followed by Robert Hayes and his family, followed by Maria Santos's children." I left Rodriguez's office feeling more terrified and alone than I had ever felt in my life. The person I had trusted to bring justice to my family's killers was actually planning to expand their criminal empire using my name and inheritance as cover. But Rodriguez had made one critical mistake in her threats. She had assumed that I was the same naive, trusting person who had walked into her office 3 months earlier with Elena's evidence. She had no idea that I had been preparing for exactly this kind of betrayal since Patricia's death. Rodriguez was not the only one who could play a long game. The moment I left Rodriguez's office, I activated a plan I had been developing in secret for the past week. Patricia's sudden death had made me suspicious of everyone involved in our investigation, including Agent Rodriguez, so I had quietly reached out to additional law enforcement contacts to verify Rodriguez's background and credentials. What I discovered was that Sarah Rodriguez was not actually an FBI agent at all. The real agent Sarah Rodriguez had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. The woman I had been working with was actually Sarah Kellerman Marcus's older sister, who had been presumed dead after disappearing from witness protection 15 years ago. Sarah Kellerman had been testifying against her abusive ex-husband when she vanished, and everyone assumed she had been murdered by his criminal associates. Instead, Sarah had stolen the real Rodriguez's identity and spent 3 years infiltrating the FBI specifically to protect Morrison Industries from federal investigation. She had been Rose Morrison's ultimate insurance policy, a federal agent who could bury evidence, misdirect investigations, and eliminate threats from within law enforcement itself. But Sarah had gotten greedy. Instead of just protecting Rose's operation, she had decided to take it over entirely, using Marcus's arrest as an opportunity to eliminate all potential rivals and claim the Morrison empire for herself. My discovery of Sarah's real identity led me to her greatest vulnerability, Detective Linda Morrison, her former handler in witness protection, who was now working as a private investigator specializing in missing persons cases. Linda had been searching for Sarah Kellerman for 15 years, and she was very interested to learn that her missing witness was alive and working as a corrupt federal agent. Sarah Kellerman was always ambitious, but I never thought she was capable of murder, Linda said when I showed her the evidence of Sarah's crimes. She was supposed to be under our protection, not building her own criminal empire. Linda introduced me to the real hero of this story, FBI Deputy Director Michael Torres, who had been conducting his own internal investigation into corruption within the Bureau. Torres had been tracking unusual patterns in federal investigations related to organized crime, and he was particularly interested in cases where evidence mysteriously disappeared or witnesses suddenly recanted their testimony. Agent Rodriguez has been on my radar for months, Torres explained during our first meeting. Too many high-profile cases have fallen apart after she became involved, and too many witnesses have died or disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Torres had been building a case against the fake Rodriguez, but he needed concrete evidence of her criminal activities. My recordings of her confession to Patricia's murder and her threats against my family provided exactly what he needed to move forward with an arrest. The challenge is that Rodriguez has been very careful to cover her tracks, Torres said. She has legitimate FBI credentials, access to federal databases, and relationships with local law enforcement that give her advance warning of any investigation into her activities. But Torres also had something that Sarah did not expect: access to Morrison Industries' real financial records, which had been seized as evidence when Marcus was arrested. Torres's forensic accounting team had discovered that someone with federal law enforcement access had been systematically altering digital records related to Morrison Industries for years, removing evidence of criminal activity and redirecting investigations away from the company's core operations. The level of access required to make these alterations could only come from someone with high-level FBI credentials, Torres explained. Rodriguez has been protecting Morrison Industries by sabotaging federal investigations from the inside. More importantly, Torres had discovered that Sarah's payments from Morrison Industries were just the tip of the iceberg. She had been receiving money from dozens of criminal organizations across the country, selling information about federal investigations and witness protection programs to anyone willing to pay her price. Rodriguez is not just corrupt. She is running a nationwide criminal enterprise that threatens the integrity of federal law enforcement, Torres said. Taking her down is a matter of national security. Torres and I developed a plan to capture Sarah in the act of attempting to take control of Morrison Industries. The plan involved me pretending to agree to Sarah's partnership proposal while wearing sophisticated recording equipment that would capture her confession to multiple federal crimes. But we also had a backup plan that Sarah could never have anticipated. Elena's evidence included detailed information about Morrison Industries' offshore bank accounts that Sarah knew nothing about because they had been established before she infiltrated the FBI. Torres's team had been quietly monitoring these accounts for weeks, and they had discovered that someone had been attempting to access them using fraudulent credentials. Rodriguez thinks she understands the scope of Morrison Industries' financial operations, but she has only seen the tip of the iceberg, Torres explained. Rose Morrison was much smarter than Rodriguez realized. Most of the company's real assets are hidden in accounts that require biometric authentication from Rose Morrison herself. The biometric locks meant that Sarah could never access the bulk of Morrison Industries' wealth, no matter how much control she gained over the company's legal structure. Rose Morrison had protected her empire from exactly this kind of internal coup by making sure that only her direct biological descendants could access the family's true fortune, which meant that I was the only person in the world who could unlock Morrison Industries' complete financial empire. Rose Morrison may have been a criminal, but she was also a woman who understood that family loyalty is a rare and precious thing, Torres said. She designed her security systems to ensure that only someone with her DNA could access the accounts that really matter. Torres's revelation about the biometric locks gave us the ultimate leverage over Sarah. She needed me alive and cooperative to access Morrison Industries' real wealth, which meant she could not simply eliminate me the way she had eliminated Patricia and the real Agent Rodriguez. But it also meant that I held the key to hundreds of millions of dollars in criminal proceeds money that could be seized by federal authorities and returned to the victims of Morrison Industries crimes over the past several decades. "The choice is yours, Sarah," Torres said. "You can help us bring down Rodriguez and shut down Morrison Industries permanently, or you can walk away and let someone else deal with the consequences. Either way, Rodriguez will never get her hands on your family's money." I thought about Elena's letter and her challenge to choose between walking away from the poison or fighting for justice. I thought about Patricia Williams, who had died trying to help me expose the truth. I thought about Margaret and David, who had spent 25 years protecting me from Rose Morrison's wrath. Most of all, I thought about Marcus sitting in a federal prison cell, believing that his sister would soon be running the empire he thought he had inherited. My choice was easy. Let's take her down. The final confrontation took place exactly where Sarah had planned it, in Rose Morrison's office at Morrison Industries, surrounded by the portraits and awards that celebrated 4 generations of criminal success. But this time, the building was filled with federal agents instead of Sarah's corrupt allies, and every word of our conversation was being recorded by equipment that Sarah's electronic countermeasures could not detect. I arrived at the scheduled time wearing a wire and carrying documents that Sarah believed would transfer control of Morrison Industries to our fake partnership. In reality, the documents were designed to capture Sarah's confession to her crimes, while simultaneously triggering the seizure of all Morrison Industries assets by federal authorities. Sarah was waiting for me in Rose's chair, looking every inch the powerful criminal mastermind she believed herself to be. She had even brought champagne to celebrate what she thought would be our first night as partners in crime. "I was hoping you would make the smart choice," Sarah said as I entered the office. "Your mother was too idealistic to understand the opportunities that Morrison Industries represented, but you clearly inherited your great-aunt's practical intelligence." "I inherited more than that," I replied, setting the fake documents on Rose's desk. "I inherited Elena's evidence, Rose's financial empire, and 25 years of rage about what this family did to the people I love." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means that you have been played Sarah Kellerman." Sarah's face went completely white when I used her real name. She reached for the gun I was certain she was carrying, but before she could draw it, Deputy Director Torres and his team burst through the office doors with weapons drawn. "FBI, nobody move." Sarah's hand froze halfway to her shoulder holster. For the first time since I had known her, she looked genuinely surprised and afraid. "Serafina Blackwood, step away from the suspect," Torres commanded, and I quickly moved to safety behind his agents. "Sarah Kellerman, you are under arrest for the murder of FBI agent Sarah Rodriguez, the murder of Patricia Williams, conspiracy to commit murder impersonating a federal officer, and approximately 47 other federal charges that we will discuss in detail during your interrogation." As Torres's team handcuffed Sarah and read her rights, she looked at me with absolute hatred in her eyes. "You have no idea what you just destroyed," she hissed. "Morrison Industries could have been worth billions under the right leadership." "Morrison Industries was built on murder and human suffering," I replied calmly. "I would rather see it destroyed than see it grow, and that is exactly what happened." Over the next 6 months, federal authorities completely dismantled Morrison Industries and every criminal organization connected to it. Using Elena's evidence and Patricia's records, they arrested over 200 people involved in the money laundering operation, including corrupt police officers, judges, and government officials who had been taking bribes for decades. The offshore accounts that Rose Morrison had protected with biometric locks contained over $300 million in criminal proceeds. At my request, all of that money was distributed to the victims of Morrison Industries crimes and their families. Maria Santos received enough money to put her 3 children through college and buy a house in a safe neighborhood. Robert Hayes got his construction business back and hired several other Morrison Industries victims as employees. Marcus Morrison and Sarah Kellerman were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus was convicted of embezzlement conspiracy to commit murder and making terroristic threats. Sarah was convicted of multiple counts of murder, impersonating a federal officer, and running a criminal enterprise that had corrupted federal law enforcement for years. But the most satisfying moment came when I finally visited Marcus in prison to tell him exactly how his empire had crumbled. "You spent your entire life believing that you were smarter than everyone around you," I told him through the prison visiting room glass. "You thought you could manipulate Rose, manipulate me, and manipulate the system to get whatever you wanted, but you never realized that the system was manipulating you." Marcus looked older and smaller than I remembered, diminished by his orange jumpsuit and the knowledge that he would never leave that place alive. "Sarah was never your ally," I continued. "She was using you to eliminate Rose and gain access to Morrison Industries. If I had not exposed her, she would have eventually eliminated you too, probably by arranging for an unfortunate accident in your prison cell." "What do you want from me, Sarah?" Marcus asked weakly. "I want you to know that Elena's evidence brought down everything Rose Morrison built, and that Patricia Williams died a hero instead of a victim. I want you to know that every person you hurt has been made whole, and every crime you committed has been answered with justice." I stood up to leave, then turned back for one final message. "And I want you to know that the last thing Rose Morrison did before she died was plan to donate millions of dollars to help orphaned children, because she spent 25 years grieving for the granddaughter she thought she had lost. You stole that opportunity for redemption from her, just like you stole everything else from everyone who trusted you." Marcus broke down crying as I walked away, but I felt no satisfaction from his tears. Justice is not about revenge. It is about making sure that good people are protected and that bad people cannot hurt anyone else. Margaret and David officially adopted me as their legal daughter, even though I was 25 years old, as a symbolic gesture of the family we had chosen to build together. We held the adoption ceremony in the same courthouse where Elena had once planned to testify against Rose Morrison, surrounded by all the people who had helped us bring justice to our family. Detective Linda Morrison became like a big sister to me, and we started a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping witnesses in protection and families affected by organized crime. Robert Hayes and Maria Santos joined our board of directors, along with several other Morrison Industries victims, who wanted to help protect future families from similar trauma. The nonprofit is called Elena's Legacy, and it has helped over 500 families in its first year of operation. We provide financial assistance, legal support, and counseling services to people who have been hurt by criminal organizations, and we work with law enforcement to identify and shut down operations like Morrison Industries before they can destroy more lives. Every year, on the anniversary of Elena's death, we hold a memorial service where we read the names of everyone who died because of Morrison Industries crimes. It is a somber ceremony, but it is also a celebration of the fact that their deaths were not in vain. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that family is not about blood. It is about loyalty, love, and the choice to protect each other, no matter what the cost. Margaret and David chose to protect me when I was vulnerable. Patricia Williams chose to seek justice even though it cost her life. Robert Hayes, Maria Santos, and Detective Morrison chose to stand with me against impossible odds. They became my chosen family, and together we proved that good people working together can overcome even the most powerful criminal enterprises. If you have ever felt betrayed by your biological family, or if you have discovered dark secrets that changed everything you thought you knew about your origins, I want you to know that you are not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me about your experience with family karma or chosen family. Have you ever had to choose between blood loyalty and doing what is right? How did you handle discovering that people you trusted had been lying to you for years? Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help other people find it and subscribe to my channel, because I will be sharing more stories about justice family drama and the power of chosen family over the coming months. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that justice is possible even when it seems like powerful people always win. Thank you for listening to my story about how love, truth, and determination can overcome even the deepest betrayals. I hope that Elena's legacy continues to inspire people to fight for justice. And I hope that you find the courage to build the family you deserve, whether that is with your blood relatives or with the people who choose to love and protect you unconditionally. Remember that karma is real, and that good people working together can always overcome evil, no matter how powerful it seems.